for that. I'd like to introduce Darren, I'll pronounce it Gerros. Gerros from eMite. Darren is the Senior Vice President of Business Development at eMite. Decades of experience working closely with customers, helping building their performance and capacity management capabilities. The topic today is automated correlation for the purposes of performance and capacity management. I like the word automated. If we can automate it, then I'm happy. My boss is happy too, my clients are happy. So really, expect the value of the how automated correlation brings to our performance and business-related metrics, a whole bunch of different sources. So feel free to make it a very interactive session, and I'm sure we'll get a bit of opportunity to ask questions at the end as well.
Interactive is good because my content's not going to last that long. So mine's more about trying to create discussion as opposed to trying to tell you guys. I think you're more in tune and probably have a lot more technical skills with capacity management than I do personally. But I do deal with a number of organisations globally that do have a lot of skills, and I've had a lot of discussions with senior capacity planners. So I'm not a capacity planner, but I've got a lot of experience dealing with those companies. And Matthew, who's also here, who works for eMite, he does the technical stuff. So if I get stuck, he's going to jump in. So I'll just...
Daz is one of those salesmen which pretends he's not technical. But actually he is, really.
So who here, first off, has actually used a CMDB or a pseudo CMDB Excel spreadsheet for capacity planning? Yeah. And what CMDB was that?
We built our own.
Okay.
It's simply SQL tables joined together with an inventory list coming from all our platforms.
Yep.
And every day we get an inventory of our existing compute storage database.
Yeah. So you probably already understand the value. So.
Absolutely, but I'm in the middle of that right now, and I come from the infrastructure space, but we need to develop that into an application level report. So the first line there, and the second line there, where the CIs in turn map the business service applications and locations, is something very important.
Yeah, that's where you might have. So I guess if we started at the bottom, so the larger organisations are the companies that I think are getting the most value out of this, because they have massive assets, and for them trying to do capacity planning based on silos, I'll do capacity planning in my SCOM data, I'll do capacity planning in my network data. It's very hard for those organisations to actually do it at a business service level. So when you're talking about large-scale applications, large-scale environments, it's very hard to pull all that data together unless you have a CMDB. If you do it manually, you've got to consistently do it manually, and you've got to try and keep it updated and all that sorts of things. So the projects, the large projects we're doing at the moment are actually combining the service management tools with the performance and capacity tools. So, working with the ServiceNow type data, working with the remedies and the HPs, the Atriums, using that asset, that CMDB asset, and those relationships as the mapping framework to actually align and aggregate the tools or the data from all the different performance tools. So, whether it's an AppDynamics, whether it's a Dynatrace, a SCOM, Nagios, whatever the data source is, the CMDB will allow you to then map the performance data. And if you can, in my intro, it was about trying to automate that and then correlate it into a single platform. So it's fine to have the relationships mapped, but unless you've actually got a tool that can correlate that data, it can timestamp the data, it can convert it all into the same format, so you can then do your correlations, your overlays, and start looking for those relationships between the data, so you can do your modelling as well. So if you can get to a point where you're pulling in the data from all those different data sources, you're using your CMDB to map the data, then you've got not only the capacity, but you've also got the real-time views of that data. So once you've got that in that format, you can do your event data as well. Then you can actually provide a business service view of those metrics. Yeah. So if you want to move up the food chain in regards to, moving up from a capacity planning, from an infrastructure perspective, I know that's the lowest term, but there's lots of different roles in capacity planning. Everyone you speak to has a completely different version of what capacity planning is going to do for them. But what this tries to do is actually move you up and actually do capacity planning at the business service level. But those CMDB relationships not only store the business services, but they also store the locations and lots of other types of aggregations that you want to start doing capacity planning based on. Once it's in there, then you've got that hierarchy. So the hierarchy is key, and that hierarchy needs to be a many-to-many relationship so that you can have a business service that relies on one server, but that server may also be supporting other business services. So you need to have that service model / CMDB hierarchy able to cater for those circumstances in your tool. But once you've got that in there as well, what it provides is a really proactive platform for giving out to the business. And provides a self-service platform. So instead of coming to the central capacity planning team saying, can I have my report at the end of the month, can you tell me what happened? But actually giving them the information that they need to actually run their own businesses. So instead of them saying, I want to log into SCOM, or I want to log into Nagios, or I want to log into whatever, all those metrics are already aligned to the business service, so you can start looking at things like capacity, you start looking at performance, you start looking at transaction volumes, and you look at the relationships between performance, volume, and all the infrastructure metrics. So that same relationship that you've created using your CMDB is also used for your capacity modelling. There might be some additional metrics you might need to pull in that may not be stored in the CMDB. That model can then do your what-if analysis. So how many of you guys mainly focus on the what-if type of stuff in the modelling? Yeah. And when you do modelling, do you normally have to go and, every time you go and do a what-if project or a modelling project, you have to actually go and get to the data source and then try and ask for the history?
Yeah, so when we do our performance gigs as well,
yeah.
capacity, the assumption is they have no information whatsoever. So we make the staff turn all these counters on,
yeah.
and we'll come back after two or three weeks. In some cases, we do have some historical information which we can use straight away. But originally, we say turn all these things on, and we give it a week or two before we come back and see what they've got.
Yeah.
And when you use that, do you use the CMDB as well, if they have one?
No.
So you just do technical or resource-based capacity planning rather than
No,
service.
what we do is usually production support people are the ones that sort of work with, and they've got it's a service-based analysis we do. It's not an application, a group of applications, and then we start piecing together the CMDB from scratch.
Right. So you'll just focus on the particular resources that are utilised by that one application.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. But they won't provide you the whole list of all of the servers to analyse and then say, this is my CMDB. Because I think that's what Darren was saying the end goal would be, right?
Yeah, but when you usually go and do a modelling project, you're usually vertical, right? You're going, okay, this is my business service. I'm not talking about 100 business services here. So you've got a particular business service and you say, I've just bought 5 more banks. Is this application going to be able to scale up? So the more history you have, and usually, if you can pull the history and align, the user counts and the current users versus transaction volumes, the end user response time performance, as well as the infrastructure metrics, and overlay them over a longer period of time. So, the value is not just in the CMDB, it's about having as much history as you can so you can get the cyclic type relationships as well.
Ideally, you have 6 weeks worth of information.
Yeah.
And ideally, in that 6 weeks, you have some sort of a seasonal peak, or at least have some understanding of the ratio of that peak versus the seasonal peak. But that's utopia. I was saying before that, 10 years ago, you rock up and they might even have like 10 years worth of information. Today, if you get more than say 21 days, you're very, very lucky.
Yeah. And it's always hard going in after the fact that if they went in with a solution that already had this, it would make your job a lot easier. And there's other assets that may not be in the CMDB. There may be. They might be coming from your asset management tool as well, which again will allow you to do modelling. So how many CPUs, how old are they? Is it physical disk or whatever? So pulling those assets in again using the CMDB relationships. The other thing is...
Who normally owns the CMDB? So organisationally,
yep.
Is it owned by the team that Do you have sort of presumably owned by a single service line business owner? So who owns it?
Well, I think that's the biggest problem in most organisations.
It starts in
Yeah.
service management usually.
Yeah, that's
The
right.
CIs, right?
Yeah. And that's why it doesn't get used.
The biggest nemesis to CMDBs and why I haven't ever seen one really work is change. And to keep up with change, even if you were to virtualize a physical server, how do you transfer that CI from the physical to the virtual and maintain history at the same time?
Yeah.
And when you're talking about spot solutions like Darren was talking about, they gave 6 weeks of data for a specific application vertically. You know, what you're talking about here, I'm assuming, is total blanket of all our applications and automatically gathering the inventory and automatically relating that to buckets that you've configured for applications. And that's the whole thing with the CMDB. It's just a categorization of further workloads into what is a business term.
Yeah, no, that's
They
right.
don't care what bits and bytes are.
Yeah. No, that's right. But that's being created at the moment by a completely different business unit to the capacity planning guys.
That's right, and it's
then
done separately. Yeah.
It's done separately, but it's a
Absolutely.
massive asset.
Yeah.
That, you know, there's companies like the Citibanks and Barclays and UBSs. These guys have really got their CMDBs in act, and they're really, you know, they've got, you know, a lot of auto discovery and the change management processes that they put in place are really accurate. So that's when I say, you know, the larger organisations are really starting to see the value from a capacity perspective in having that asset.
You make a start, turn all these cameras on,
Yeah.
and we'll come back after 2 or 3 weeks. In some cases, we do have some historical information which we use straight away. But provisionally, we say, turn all these things on, and we give it a week or 2 before we come back and see what they've got.
Yeah.
And when you use that, do you use the CMDB as well, if they have one?
No.
So you just do technical or resource-based capacity planning rather than
No,
service
what we do is usually production support people are the ones that we work with, and they've got it's a service-based analysis. We do some object application, bullet applications, and then we start piecing together the CMDB from scratch.
Right. So you'll just focus on the particular resources that are utilised by that one application.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. But they won't provide you the whole list of all of the servers to analyse and then say this is my CMDB. Because I think that's what Darren was saying the end goal would be, right?
Yeah, but when you usually go into a modelling project, you're usually vertical, right? You're going, okay, this is my business service. I'm not talking about 100 business services here. So you've got a particular business service and you say, I've just bought 5 more banks. You know, is this application going to be able to scale up? So the more history you have, and usually, you know, if you can pull the history and align, you know, the user counts and the current users versus transaction volumes, the end user response time performance, as well as the infrastructure metrics, and overlay them over a longer period of time. So, you know, the value is not just in the CMDB, it's about having as much history as you can so you can get the cyclic type relationships as well.
Ideally, you have 6 weeks worth of information.
Yeah.
If you're not dealing with 6 weeks, you have some sort of a seasonal peak. Or at least you have some understanding of the ratio of that peak versus the seasonal peak. But yeah, that's utopia. And the same before that, you know, 10 years ago, you rock up and we've got, they might even have like 10 years worth of information. Today, if you get more than say 21 days, you're very, very lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always hard going in after the fact that if they went in with a solution that already had this, it would make your job a lot easier.
Oh, yeah.
And there's other assets that may not be in the CMDB. There may be. They might be coming from the asset management tool as well, which are again will allow you to do modelling. So, you know, how many CPUs, how old are they? You know, is it physical disk or whatever? So, pulling those assets in again using the CMDB relationships. The other thing is,
Who normally owns the CMDB? So organisationally,
Yep.
is it owned by the team that, do you have some, because typically you're owned by a single service line business owner. So who owns it? Like
well, I think
service
that's the
management
biggest
team or-
problem.
It
in
starts
most
in
organisations.
service management usually.
Yeah, that's
where
right.
your CIs are.
Yeah. And that's why it doesn't get used.
The biggest nemesis to CMDBs and why I haven't ever seen one to really work is change. And to keep up with change, even if you were to virtualize a physical server, how do you transfer that CI from the physical to the virtual and maintain history at the same time?
Yeah.
And when you're talking about spot solutions like Darren was talking about, where they gave 6 weeks of data for a specific application vertically, what you're talking about here, I'm assuming is total blanket of all our applications and automatically gathering inventory and automatically relating that to buckets that you've configured for applications. And that's the whole thing with the CMDB. It's just a categorization of further workloads into what is a business term.
Yeah, no, that's
I
right.
don't care what bits and bytes are.
Yeah. No, that's right. But that's being created at the moment by a completely different business unit to the capacity planning guys.
That's right, and it's
then
done separately. Yeah.
It's done separately,
Absolutely.
but it's a massive asset.
Yeah.
That there's companies like the Citibanks and the Barclays and the UBSs. These guys have really got their CMDBs in act, and they're really, they've got a lot of auto discovery and the change management processes that they put in place are really accurate. So that's when I say, the larger organisations are really starting to see the value from the capacity perspective in having that asset. But there's so many companies, it's like jumping over the fence. You build an application, you throw it over the fence, who cares anymore? It's not me, it's a different area. So it's the same with the service management area. They're a completely different area, and they should be related to performance and capacity.
Yeah. It's also worth noting that if we're going to model stuff in the CMDB, it has to be modelled as a slowly changing dimension. If there's any technical guys here, but what that means is that we can report on the CMDB as it was today, and also last week and last month and 6 months ago. So the relationships are constantly changing, right? So if we're going to do this, then you'd have to make sure that you can report on today's CMDB and also last week's and last month's CMDB.
Yep.
That's critical.
Which references your question?
Yeah, the way we tackled that is for every piece of inventory we have there, we have a history tag, which essentially gives you what it was, delimited, the next one, the next one. And the reason for that is we're moving all our workloads into the cloud. So what we want to see is things transition regionally, centrally into our primary data centers, and from primary data centers into the cloud, all straight from regions into the cloud. And you'll see that history. So whilst you're talking about multiple data sets, if you maintain that history and delimit it, so you get a lifeline, a life cycle, then you can actually work off a single data set, the latest data set, with all the history behind that.
That's true. And speaking of outsourcers, they're one of the organisations that really embracing the CMDB because they've got one of their relationships for them is customer, and they're reusing that for capacity and performance and reporting, etc. The other thing that CMDB is really good at is if you want to do analytical reporting with your capacity data is using that as a hierarchy, using it as a dimension inside a cube. So you can then slice and dice your data. So you can say, I want to look at average CPU consumption by business service or by application or which servers belong to this business service. So from an analytical perspective, it's got massive benefits because it does become a dimension that becomes sliceable and filterable against everything else. So it just gives you another level of value, I guess. As I said, larger companies are the main ones that want to do it. So this is one that is really interesting for me because when I go in and see all these different organisations, every one of them has a completely different understanding of what capacity is. So, reporting. So a lot of people think that capacity management is just doing reporting. I need to produce a report for governance perspective, and it takes up a hell of a lot of time, and it's usually a manual process. And then you've got your trending, so you're looking at your history, then you're looking at your aggregations, how long do I need to aggregate for? Do I need to do it by the minute, averages, standard deviations, and all that sort of stuff as well. And then you've got the modelling. So, the purists really focus on the modelling side, and that's where organisations, large banks and everything really focus on, I'm going to make a change to my application, I really need to understand the impact of that modelling. The other thing that is becoming fairly popular is the standard deviations of abnormal behaviour and then modelling that in real time. So using the same capacity and performance data to actually understand what's abnormal right now and reacting on that. And then using that same CMDB relationship allows you to define that based on business services. And then they use it for dashboarding, chargeback, SLAs. And the bottom one, most organisations that I've spoken to are doing capacity at a silo-based level. So, the guys that run the database will do their capacity reporting. The guys that run the service will do their capacity reporting. And then you've got the APM tools that are coming in and running it as a business service and sort of changing the landscape there and going vertical. So, has anyone got any feedback on that? Because, how does everyone how does everyone else see capacity planning? Do you see that holistically, or is there certain areas that people here are focusing on?
Definitely siloed, and probably two life stages. So one is the capacity planning for something that's already in production, and you're trying to just manage capacity for it all the time, or you're trying to manage capacity around a projected campaign or change. And then the other is your modelling, predicting, forecasting around you've got a new service, and you're trying to work out what you can elicit from existing capacity planning models that might give you some inclination as to what's going to happen with that new service and what infrastructure and otherwise it might need. So it's probably those two use cases that you see at the moment. They're very much siloed.
Does everyone agree with that? Siloed, mainly at the moment, unless you're doing, you know, modelling exercise and you're doing it in a business service or an APM, you're doing it in a business service. But mainly capacity planning, we've seen was really silo based. You know, this is my area and I need to manage my discs so they don't run out.
Yeah, it depends where capacity planning lies. And working with Theo since 2007, the thing I learned of him was, you know, it's about what does it cost, frameworks around the environment to pull all the silos together. So it's a capacity planning framework, the capacity management framework is a big thing. And it needs to go from the business all the way through the app to the infrastructure. It needs to cross enterprise architecture, infrastructure architect, and all operations, DevOps, and the whole lot. So if you're working capacity planning in operational space and you're a server guy, then naturally it's by design siloed.
Yeah.
Right? If you work in an architecture space, in a strategic space, and you work on more the financial modelling and the costs and the business benefits, aligning it with the 3-5 year trends of the businesses where they're going, that's where you get the best benefit. And it's at that high enough level where it's centralised enough and everything else just feeds into that and is directed by it. And what you'll find, hopefully, is if everyone is aligned with the same objectives going forward, the server capacity management and the network capacity management just falls and aligns with it. So it depends how you do it. If you've got a team of capacity planners, you can do everything.
Yeah.
If you've got one capacity planner in News Corp Australia, like me, then you don't do everything. And you need to rely on everyone to do their job, right?
Yeah.
But the only way you can align everybody and their expectations and their design is to build a framework. And I think if you haven't got a framework in place, you will never get any alignment.
Yep.
That's just a statement.
Yep. That's good. That's why I put this slide up here. It's really, you know, you've got your resource management, which is the silos, and then you've got your service management, and then leads into the business capacity management. So, you know, it really, to be able to do the business capacity management, you need the guys at the resource level to have done their job. You need the tools to be able to capture the data, the right data, but you need to do it on a continuous basis. So capacity planning is, in past, been more like reactive and manual, but I think, you know, with the tools and the availability these days, it's very much business driven. It needs to be real time. It needs to be automated. Has anyone got any comments on that side? Yeah. I stole it.
And that's why you get different views of capacity planning. You know, we all work at different levels there.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why it's all different. By design and stuff.
And that involves all those points that I covered before, all those different life cycles.
Just going to ask, how do you know that you're succeeding capacity management through each of those levels?
You're meeting the strategic objectives of the business. And that's the last point. If you flick back to that slide, that arrow that goes at the bottom, technology focus, and goes up to the business, I think in the last 10 years that's flipped. Where technology used to drive the business, technology used to say, we could do this for you, we could share this platform with you, we can create this capability, and whatnot. Now it's, the business is driving technology, and technology just needs to quickly get up to speed and get it done. Right? And that's the place of system performance right now. It's like the business is going there, no matter what. It doesn't make any sense to pull it 3-4 hops away from the data center that it lies in, but guess what? It's going there. You need to sort it out technologically. And that's the way it's going.
Which is specs more now.
100%. Business is driving technology. There's no other way around it.
And to answer your question, as well on the same lines, if you're engaged with the business, you know you're on the right track. If business aren't really working with you or not even trying to get you involved, you know you're on the wrong way. So it's really that business engagement.
Yeah, I mean, where I was coming from was, if you're saying that you're going to optimise these systems, then what is optimisation?
Well, like I think Theo just said, if the business is engaging you, then you are providing value, and hence that's a measure of success.
Yeah,
But you can-
sure, but you can have an IT service that is fully available and is costing you 20 times what it should cost you. So going back to my point is that
Sure, there's KPIs which you
as
can
long
use
as
to
it's
measure.
actually, yeah, if you're doing this in the right way, you've got KPIs.
I want to hear from Kieran.
Hey Lincoln, can you pass your card out to Melinda so she can get
I was
pizza?
going to say, the one thing I always got from this was, in recent, I think you'll kind of look back over 20 years and it was, I run an IT shop and aren't you lucky for me letting you run your application online? That's what it was like 20 years ago. Now, you have to sit there and say, you're a business, and I've got a service to offer you. And I have to compete with the outsourcers. I have to compete with the cloud. I have to compete with people who will run as a completely, I could run an App Dynamics, for example. I don't have to install it locally. I can run it on their hardware. Now, that's internally who I've got to compete with. So I've got to cut my cloth to suit that. I've got to sharpen my pencil and I've got to make sure that I do a bloody better job than my outsourcers, than that Dynamics externally supported, host stuff. And I've got to do it better in a way that says, let's face it, I'm going to be sat here dragging things like app around with me to make sure that I provide governance pieces for legal entities. But I have to, I'm an Australian financial service, people like that, who are now turning around and saying, you can host your data offshore, or you can host your data outside your organisation. However, if it contains a name, if it contains an address, if it contains a phone number, an email address, or anything that personalises that, you better be storing it on encrypted disks. So if that disk goes missing, nobody else can get into it. There is also a lot of stuff that we're starting to see inside of this that's turning around and saying, you can push the stuff out into the cloud. You do have responsibility to make sure how you connect, what you connect with, is secure. So people, anyone that you get any of these man-in-the-middle pieces or anything like that, they're not going to be able to sit there and look at that data and go, oh yeah, this Theo's data, let's play around with that. The landscape's changing, you have to change with it.
We were talking about the cloud a couple of years ago, how it's capacity management, performance management, clouds around. It's like we went from mainframe to distributed systems. You need more principles around performance and capacity because it is more and more complex. A true cloud solution is one or two or three full cloud providers. So there's applications now spanning the globe 2 or 3 times. So from a performance management perspective, how the hell do you get that end-to-end view? From a capacity point of view, how do you know that the providers are providing what you've signed up for? So it's basically providing a service. In this case, the business is the person that's your sponsor that looks at it from end to end, but also provides that value above and beyond all the other service providers, which could be siloed or it could be outsourced completely.
Peter's here. I'm going to just wrap up with a couple more quick slides. So what the CMDB is about is actually providing enrichment for the data. It's providing a way of aggregating and storing and enriching the data to allow the end users, the capacity planners, to do their job a lot quicker, a lot faster, a lot more automated. The pizzas aren't quite here yet.
You're talking, okay?
Yeah. So, again, it's about automation. It's about, and this is, I don't want to do an eMite pitch because that's not what we're here for, but, we do a lot of automated integration from multiple different data sources, whether, it's the business data or whether it's the operational data, whether it's pulling, call wait times on a PABX or whether it's number of CPUs and response time data. But it's about pulling that and using that CMDB to align the data, to enrich the data, and then to store it into a warehouse that you can use for your capacity reporting in a format. It's all one single format. You don't have to convert it. It's all timestamped. It's all in the same timestamp. So you can overlay metrics, you can predict, you can trend, you can correlate, you can aggregate, you can apply all your different prediction models, and then you can slice and dice that data once it's in there as well using a cube, so that, you know, that CMDB becomes a dimension. So if you want to look at, you know, the disks by, you know, which one's going to run out next by application or by location or by service provider. So, and then the last point is that, you know, that again, that CMDB relationship hierarchy allows you to provide a multi-tenanted view of that information to the end users. So that if I'm a business owner, I'm only responsible for one application when I log in, using that same CMDB hierarchy, I only get to see the metrics that I'm responsible for and that I care about, without having to then go and create a whole new platform for them to look at and then maintain and update. It comes in, it's automatically aligned. All the aggregations and analysis has been done. So that's about it for me. Hope it was worthwhile. Hope it wasn't too productive, but yeah.
So, Darren, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Most of my customers don't understand CMDB, don't have a CMDB, right? And getting from a Holden into a Ferrari it's a long journey.
Yeah.
Where do we start?
With customers, like we're doing a project, for example, with Westpac at the moment, they don't have very good CMDB either. So they went through a manual exercise of actually working out which metrics are responsible for which business services, and they created their own spreadsheet service model, and we use that spreadsheet as our service model. So it's really, whether it's a spreadsheet or whether it's an automatic CMDB relationship hierarchy, it's really about having that as a way of aggregating automatically. So when the data does come in from the tools, it does have some way of being structured and aligned to the business services, and then giving those business service views to the different customers based on those relationships. So you don't need to have a CMDB. It is better if someone in another business area is doing it and doing it really well, using auto discovery tools and whatever they have over your infrastructure and reusing it. But if they don't have it, then you still need to do, there's still a heap of benefit in creating that service model hierarchy in a spreadsheet or whatever other platform they're in.
Do you have any open source tools that customers might start with, before actually going in? And so if I were to convince, let's say a customer, for example, who's got absolutely zero maturity in the space, but as a vendor or as a consultant, you see tremendous value, but you can't convince a customer to spend, let's say $300K in buying licenses. Are there open source CMDBs that you could start with and then have a migration path to actually move into something else?
Matt can probably answer that one better than that. So what would you recommend? Like, we do have a relationship hierarchy where you can map the data anyway. It's not a CMDB, but it's a hierarchy where you can drag things in and then align them. But I don't know, you've got auto discovery tools, there's open source auto discovery tools. We're sort of, in that space, we are very vendor agnostic, and we usually just choose what we go with what the vendor's got. So I can't recommend too much on that front myself, but you might be able to, or someone else might be able to.
Yeah, there are some open source CMDBs. There's one called Open CMDB. That's probably the one that's most people are using for open source CMDB.
To start with, probably as an option.
Yeah, and that uses a MySQL database, and it's easy to connect to and get data out. So that's one I would recommend.
Just to start with.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you.
No worries, thanks guys.
What we'll do, maybe take about a 5 or 6 minute break and refresh your palate.
Julia next.
Next start.